Back in 1986, when shoulder pads were big and hair was even bigger, Honda broke cover at the start of the Dakar Rally with a very special bike. HRC had built something completely unique, a hand-built prototype with a custom frame, full factory brakes and suspension, and a 750cc water-cooled twin-cylinder engine that looks as much like a modern bike as it does something from the 80s. It brought in ideas that would shape Dakar bikes for decades: the high mount airbox, the split fuel tanks, and a massive radiator and fan. Honda dominated the 86 Dakar with a full podium sweep, becoming the first water-cooled bike to claim the win. They went on to claim 4 back-to-back wins, and from that Dakar win, Honda hit the drawing board, releasing the very first production Africa Twin XRV 650. They were mostly sold to the European public. That's the Africa Twin that we now all know, the Africa Twin that became Adam Rieman's Warhorse. It's a bike born from a direct relationship to desert racing, a bike designed to get you from A to B, and when you ride it, it feels like that. Sure, the brakes are kind of 80s, the suspension is simple, but even today they hold up pretty well. Now, all that 80s Dakar heritage would make you think you're buying a full-blown, thoroughbred race bike, but that's not the case. You're buying a great travel bike. The seat height is manageable, the balance good, it handles well, but it doesn't cover ground in the same way as a race bike. It's a travel bike designed to get you from A to B across deserts and mountains and be comfortable. It's a bike people fell in love with, and 30 years later, Riemann has captured the nostalgia of a generation that grew up with images of it. You can still buy the parts for them, you can buy full-blown suspension upgrade kits, and the second-hand market is a little bit crazy. The reality is, for most people, a 30-year-old bike isn't the right option, and when you turn to the reborn modern Africa Twin, you'll find an adventure touring bike. It's big, it's ultra powerful, and a very different idea to the original models. It's ballistically fast and plush like a couch, and for everything it does well, it's just a different idea of an adventure bike to that Africa Twin. A little while back, I got the pleasure of riding something that surprised me massively. It felt way closer to the Warhorse, that original Africa Twin idea, than I ever expected. It was manageable, it was playful, it was fun, and most importantly, it was really good at covering ground in a rider-friendly way. I was not intimidated by it. It was this Honda Transalp by Outback Motortech. With some simple mods, it was a bike transformed. It left me dreaming of the untapped potential to be the Honda a lot of people want the Africa Twin to be. Now, like all project bikes, it doesn't start at the finish. We're starting here with a stocker. It's a touring bike with some off-road dustings, an adventure trail bike, not a travel bike. So we need to make some pretty big changes to create our very own modern Warhorse. I think you've got the idea. I think the Transalp is packed with potential to make a killer adventure bike. Not a T7 project bike that's basically like a race bike or an enduro bike, but a brilliant bike to explore the world on. It does need de-roading a little because, quite frankly, Honda don't seem to know what they've actually built for themselves. So I made some plans. I did a few mock-ups in Photoshop and then set out to make the Transalp cool. I got my friend Evan to come and help me, and we set about stripping the Transalp down. Now, the first step, because it's shiny and cool, was to change the exhaust system. I ordered an HP Corsa titanium high mount tailpipe and midpipe. It's not a full system, we're still legal in the UK, but it gets rid of that low mounting position from the stock exhaust. It looks infinitely cooler with this elephant nose design and definitely changes the character of the bike a bit. I think for the price, you're getting a really good value, good quality and good performance product. I did talk about this in the Outback Motortech Transalp review, and that's the reason I chose this exhaust. You do lose the pillion pegs, but I'm okay with that for this project. The next step was to remove the rear rack and the tail light. I think they're kind of large and bulky, and they don't necessarily make this bike easier to ride off-road. My plan was to run a rackless luggage system anyway, and the bike looks far better without the whole rack system. I'm not sure how I'm going to solve the mounting for the luggage at the moment, but I think we'll figure that out later. One of the biggest downsides to the Transalp is the engine design and the really vulnerable sump. It doesn't come with any protection of any kind standard, you have to spec it from Honda, so you know that I was going to bolt on the Outback Motortech sump guard and crash bars. They've been supporting this channel for a long time, I think they're an awesome company, and I've abused their kit with zero problems, especially on a Transalp. The first step was to fit the sump guard so that we had something to jack the bike up with on a stand so that we could do other things like take wheels out and so on. Once we had that on, but before we fit the bars, we pulled the whole front end of the bike off so we could fit something that I'm really excited about. I am a huge fan of tech when it's implemented well, and I especially love cruise control, and this company in the US called Viridian makes a cruise control unit for the Transalp and a few other bikes. It's really neat and it works like a factory fit design by plugging into all the electronics. Now, we had to remove the fuel tank to fit this, and this is one of the bigger downsides to a Transalp. It's quite street bike-like to work on in the same way a Tenere 700 is, with lots of panel clips, and some of the clips are hidden and the mounting is really fiddly. To get into this, you need to unclip the screen surround and then work your way backwards. I also took the handlebars off to make this a little bit easier, and because I have a plan to change them. Now, eventually we got everything taken off and the fuel tank off and got to the airbox, and this is a bit of a concern for me with this in an adventure bike. Getting to an airbox shouldn't be a difficult job, but the upside of having a high airbox is it should be a little bit more dust resistant than one where the rear wheel can kick the dust into it. We wanted to do an air filter swap to a Sprint filter. Now, I've used a Sprint filter previously on our T7 project and it didn't really work that well, but it turns out that filter that we used was really aimed for street riding, and because Sprint ran into some problems with it letting dust through, they changed the design and came up with something new, so I opted to give it a second go with this new design. I'm skeptical, but we are definitely going to check in at the end to see how it went and whether the filter actually did the job it was meant to do. We unscrewed the filter, removed the stock paper filter and replaced it with this K&N style material filter that Sprint make. It popped into place perfectly, and then Ev screwed it down. Now, my friend Evan is a much better mechanic than me. He was the mechanic when I raced the Dakar, so I left him to read the Viridian's instructions while I started fitting some new handlebars. It's something that's much simpler and more in my wheelhouse.
That's a control module for the system. So it's going to piggyback onto the existing fly-by-wire. Connector for the fly-by-wire is just tucked in here. So we're going to pop that off. Splice this in, so that bit will go into there, and that bit into there. This little purple baby here, brake light switch connector, is tucked in here. So we'll pop that off here. Just going to pull back, and we're going to have to make a little splice into this black blue wire here.
This process required a little splicing into the existing wiring, using the wiring and the splicing and so on that Viridian provided. Now, the process was mostly simple, and it took Evan as long as it took me to mount and drill the new handlebars. Now, the kit came with 2 optional switches that you can choose when you check out. I opted for the 3D printed switch to start with because it can be stuck onto the existing switchgear using some 3M tape, and it's easier in theory to use on the fly. Now, changing the handlebars. The stock position of the Transalp is actually quite nice to ride on the day-to-day. It's a good kind of middle ground between a good road riding position and a good off-road riding position. But the main reason to change the bars was I wanted to improve that off-road position a little bit more and move the bias in that direction. I always find the Honda to be a little too upright, and that makes uphill stuff more work than I think it should be. So for this, I went with an old set of Pro Taper Contour Woods highs that I've had on the garage shelf for ages because I bought the wrong bars one time. I also swapped the stock levers out for some fully adjustable, unbreakable ASV C-Series levers. I'm always on the fence about levers because sometimes they work really well, sometimes I think they can be hit and miss. But for this project, I like the idea of everything on the bike being kind of unbreakable. There is nothing worse than delicate parts on a bike, and the OG Africa Twin was pretty good for this. Dakar bikes are exceptional for this, and I wanted ours to be as robust as we could make it. Part of de-roadifying the bike was to get some good off-road pegs on there to replace the stock Honda pegs that look like they've been borrowed from an 84 XL 600. Honda have some really nice rally pegs in their official parts catalogue, so they went on instead, and I think they're going to do the job really well. So we have hit a little impasse where we have run out of parts and I'm about to go away for 3 weeks. I've noticed a few little details that need improving. I did take it out for a cheeky ride. The weather's been nice. I had some friends down and it pointed a few things out to me. The handlebars are going to be a problem and we might need to do something about that because there's now another screen on there because we had to do something about that. And it's one finger between the lever because the lever is obviously a bit bigger than a stock lever, and then the dash here, and also on the stock screen this comes much more in here. So this is a puig, no one knows, only Italians know the answer to that, screen. So I think either the clamps are going to have to go back the other way, or we're going to have to get some flatter, straighter, lower handlebars, which, having ridden it, I think I would prefer. We'll cover that more in the second episode, but for now, I'm going to take some nice shots of the parts for you, and we'll leave it there. And we'll pick it up right from this point onwards when the next parts arrive. Off camera, I fitted a few more parts in a rush before I left the country. The first were the Outback Motortech crash bars in white. I've used these bars a lot now and they are relatively easy to fit and they are so biblically strong it is a joke. I have dropped them multiple times in an aggressive way, no problems. Now the white kind of felt like a bold choice. I wouldn't normally choose white, I'm a bit more minimalist than that. But with the colour scheme that I've got planned, I think this is going to work really well. I swapped the stock road tyres for something well loved on the internet, the Motoz Ral Z. I've used this tyre a fair bit now and surprisingly I think it works quite well in the UK, especially on the wet rock. It's also well known to last a while, so that seemed like a decent match for the whole idea. The last mod I did was to wrestle a seat concept, seat and seat foam onto the Transalp, which I will probably never actually manage to film because this process is so infuriating to do on your own. I had to get a friend in to come and help me. I opted for the tall rally seat and honestly this was mostly an aesthetic choice. I normally like a tall seat, but I think it looks really good with the nice straight line running through the bike. It's a bit more Dakar. Anyway, that's it for episode 1. Hit subscribe if you want to make sure you catch the next episodes, and remember, life's better when you're riding.